All right, Sam, we got to talk business here because this is very important. Tate and I are clueless with NBA stuff. That's the criticism people have of us, is that we're talking about. So we have to bring an NBA guy like you on to explain all this to us. So first of all, you are an NBA draft guy. The draft is, I believe, like 7 weeks away from today, I think, if I did my math correctly.
Sure.
Yeah,
sounds right.
So it's coming up quickly, but obviously there's the coronavirus situation. So the question becomes, they've already postponed the lottery and the combine. What is the sense out there as far as, like, is this draft going to happen on time, do we think? What are scouts like panicking about how they're evaluating players in a time when you can't really bring guys in to work out? Like, what is the overall vibe in the NBA world as we're approaching the draft here?
So yeah, the decision to postpone the lottery and the combine, I think, is one that didn't take anyone by surprise. And then additionally, I would also just note that it's very unexpected now that has happened, that the NBA draft is going to happen when it's currently scheduled to happen. Just based off the feedback that I'm getting, like, teams generally are going to want to have the same amount of time that they typically had from the lottery, when they knew they had a lockdown draft order, until the draft date, which is typically something like you said, 7 weeks ahead. So basically, whenever they have the lottery, and they can't really have the lottery until they decide what they're going to do with the season, because if they're going to play 5-6 regular season games before a playoffs, that's obviously going to affect the standings. I think that they're going to have to figure out what's going to happen there first. Once they figure that out, I think we'll probably have a lottery within short order, and probably something like 6 to 7 weeks after that lottery is when I would anticipate the NBA draft.
That's fascinating. I didn't even really thought about that they have to figure out what they're doing with the season, because it impacts the lottery, which then impacts the draft.
Yeah, and like the other part of this is that no one really knows what's going to happen with the season, and that is the absolute first and foremost priority of everyone involved in all of this. Like the draft, when I talked to someone probably 3 weeks into this, coronavirus pandemic world, they were just like, honestly, and this is someone like in the league office, they were just like, honestly, I don't think the draft, word draft has come up once in our discussions, just because, they're trying to figure out other things, and the draft will fall in when it does. So, I think that the draft is on the back burner, but it's something that'll just figure itself out whenever they figure out the rest of the issues.
Yeah, I think it's pointless to try to guess, I suppose, like a date that it'll come back, because, like, I don't think the people in the NBA, like, we're all just following the advice of the scientists, who then pass it down to the politicians, who then the NBA people get their thing from them, and then like, no one really knows. We're just all looking up to the top, like, waiting for word here. So that I suppose is a pointless exercise to try to guess when the draft will actually happen. But as far as, like, the scouting process, what the scouts are doing right now, because I find this so fascinating that usually right now there would be individual workouts. Usually there would be a combine approaching. Usually we would have NCAA tournament footage, which some people put a lot of stock in that, like how well a guy plays in the tournament, whatever. We have no NCAA tournament. We have no individual workouts. But basically, it's my understanding that these guys are going off of what, like, regular season game tape? Like, how do you scout in this environment?
Well, you kind of mentioned the idea that the NCAA tournament tends to play this really pivotal role in, evaluating draft prospects, overall stock. The reason for that is pretty simple, actually. It's more logistics than it is like, oh, they performed under pressure. If you think about the way that the NBA schedule lies, up until basically mid-February, teams are pretty locked in, or at least high-level executives are pretty locked in, doing trade deadline stuff, doing roster management stuff. And then after the trade deadline passes, those guys finally get a bit more time to be able to go out to these bigger events where they can see, the SEC tournament, they can go see 14 teams at once, right? And knock off 14 teams. They can go to the ACC tournament and see 15 teams at once over the course of 4 days, and actually, just be able to evaluate on a wider scale. So logistically, it just ends up making a lot more sense for those guys to wait until February, March, and then April and May on the international side end up rolling around, because it's just a bit less of a hassle for them to get out in the middle of the season. So that part of it's really interesting because a lot of high-level executives didn't get that chance to go out and see a ton of prospects this year. A lot of meetings that are happening right now are basically just Zoom meetings. And there was a memo sent around saying that like teams can only have 2 hours worth of Zoom meetings per each prospect right now. So, you know, there's that. There's the fact that you're not doing these large scale workouts, which is affecting a lot of the, I guess, like borderline draftable to non-draftable guys that end up trying to test their stock, right? So I think that it's impacting those guys. I think it's impacting the process at a high level. But then you talk to NBA executives and scouts that have been around all year, and they're like, yeah, we actually kind of like this because we think that it's going to result in less confirmation bias or less recency bias of having these kids in and then just being like, oh, we fell in love with them during this workout that happened for 2 hours. Let's make sure and take him, instead of relying on the 40 hours of tape that we have.
He has a firm handshake. Let's
Right.
let's trade up to get him.
As Dan Dockich said with Kristaps Porzingis, he has kind eyes.
His kind eyes. Yeah. Don't draft him. Leave him alone.
Yes. It's hard to translate that over Zoom, especially in these days. So Sam, all right, so we got it all figured out. Everyone has their list of prospects, all the scouts are ready to go. Now they're looking at their list. They've made their big boards. Everyone's still making their big boards. And as I look around and I scour the internet, I see one name atop most of these boards, Sam, and it's a very exciting, situation for a lot of people that have been in the basketball world for quite some time. It's LaMelo Ball, who is from Australia, and I wish he would have changed his name to something else just to see like if he could trick everybody. But again, we all know LaMelo Ball, we know LeVar Ball, we know the Ball family. I mean, what are teams saying about the fact that LaMelo is probably the best prospect right in this draft?
Yeah, I think that I would say the name that I hear most from NBA teams, at least in terms of consistency, is probably Anthony Edwards. And then there's just kind of a mix of guys. Like some really like James Wiseman, some really like LaMelo Ball.
Killian Hayes. That's the name that I hear. Killian Hayes, right? That's the one that everyone wants to jump on, the new Luka.
I mean, I think that that's pretty indefensible, number one. But you know what? Like, it's a bad draft. If you want to have a guy at number one that you think is going to be the 20th best point guard in the league and have a reasonable amount of certainty with that, sure.
Cole Anthony.
How many guys,
Anthony, that's the pick.
Sam, how many guys? This does feel like the draft. Like at number one, it's more wide open than it's ever been before.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many guys would you say realistically have a shot at being drafted number one? I mean, you already kind of listed a few, but
yeah, I'd say Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball for sure, depending on who gets the pick. I'd be surprised if Obi Toppin went number one, but there are people that do like him.
Can we talk about that? Why is that surprising? I kind of know, like I know because I'm a basketball genius and I understand all this stuff. But for the people that don't know, let's talk to them a little bit, Sam. Why is Obi Toppin? Like the guy is the most electrifying player in college basketball by far. He wins all the National Player of the Year awards. You go back to the last couple drafts, it seems like the most you can't really quantify this, but the guy who's the quote most electrifying guy in college basketball, so to speak, almost always goes like 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is, like Zion and Ja Morant last year, right? Like those two guys, you don't overthink it. You're like Zion Williamson, he was an absolute beast. Take him number one. DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley, same sort of thing. Like those guys were just dominant from start to finish. So why when you look at Obi Toppin, you're saying the draft is weak this year. We watched him all year. He's obviously athletic enough. He obviously has a long enough wingspan. What is it about him that doesn't make him like a surefire number one, number two guy?
Yeah, so in the case of Toppin, a lot of the guys that you just mentioned, Zion, Ja Morant, Luka Doncic, Marvin Bagley, DeAndre Ayton, right? These guys were all 18 and 19 years old whenever they got drafted. Obi Toppin is already 22. So there's a bit of a question of how much room does he still have to grow. I tend to be someone that thinks, this kid had to go through some adversity. He ended up going a year of prep school because he didn't have any high school offers, Division I offers coming out of high school, and then ends up having to redshirt at Dayton for a year before blossoming as a freshman and absolutely becoming a monster as a sophomore. I tend to like those guys that are on an upward trajectory because I think that they continue to get better throughout the course of their careers. But, some executives and some scouts tend to look at it more in terms of aging curves. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to that, but I think that it's certainly just an actuality of the way that the process works.
Mm-hmm.
The second part is there is some concern about what defensive position Obi Toppin plays. He played the 5 at Dayton for, I think it was like 91% of his possessions this season. And in the NBA, he just doesn't really have the rim protection skills to do that, because while you mentioned that he does have a long wingspan, he actually doesn't. It's measured at Nike Basketball Academy last summer, I believe in July or early August, it was right around like 6'11". So
that can't be true. No.
Yeah, no, he
That's
just
faulty science.
He leaps so high that like he's so explosive that I think it doesn't matter as much for him that he's not.
I'm just so used to seeing him like swinging on the rim, and he's got like looks like he's I don't know, the visual of Obi Toppin, it seems like his arms are like 12 feet long. That's insane.
And I think that like he plays a little bit bigger than his height because he kind of has like a shorter neck, which is legitimately something that NBA scouts look at in terms of like guys that play to their height, right? So yeah, I think that he is someone that I'm a fan of. Like I have him in the top 4. I think that I'm probably a little bit higher on him than some people are, but there is a concern about what defensive position he plays. Can he actually drop his hips and defend in space? What is his lateral quickness like? Just because Dayton, they sheltered him a little bit defensively this year, and it's not like Dayton in general was some juggernaut on defense either.
Yeah, they definitely were not. Yeah.
For the best access, perspective, and personalities in all of sports, follow us at Fox Sports on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.